college, I myself, when I was 18, had an unplanned pregnancy.
Why don't you go ahead and just, before we hop straight into it, just share who you are, a little bit of like where you're from, your background and everything. And then if you have any, do you have like speakers or anything? I hear like a loud echo.
Oh, it possibly could be my air conditioning unit, which I can turn off. So.
Oh, no. That's not a problem. It's just like sometimes people have like two phones or whatever, where they're like watching here and watching there, and you can hear the feedback. So I'll just mute mine when you're talking, but
Okay.
Go ahead and share who you are, where you're from and everything, and then we'll hop into like what you do and stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Hannah Wolfe. I'm the Capital Area Regional Coordinator with Students for Life of America. I live right outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, so about 15 minutes from the Capitol. That's the area I work in. Students for Life is the largest pro-life youth organization that exists. We're on 1,300 plus campuses across the United States. And my job, I work with campus groups in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. So I work with more than 100 groups in this area. So.
Wow.
Yeah, we're kept pretty busy.
So share a little bit about your background, your like your origin story, because we've got plenty of time. We'll get into the the meat of the conversation, but
yeah. Absolutely. I grew up in the South originally, so I'm not from this area. I grew up in a military family. I grew up very pro-life, and I grew up in a Christian home, so that was kind of my whole background. I was like I was in church from within the womb, so I was always there, always doing ministry. I actually went to college for worship leadership, so that was my intention, was to be a worship leader. And God just called me elsewhere. But I've lived a lot of different places. I've lived everywhere from Alaska to Florida, but I've kind of found a home here, and yeah, love doing what I'm doing.
What part of Florida?
I was in Orlando.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Nice. I used to live in Florida. That's nice.
So you're in Disney World.
Yeah, I worked at Disney. I did the Disney College internship. So
there you go.
That's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, awesome. It's fun.
Okay, so I guess that was a better summary than I was expecting. That was kind of in a nutshell. I don't really have any more questions about your background, I guess. So you had these convictions about abortion and things like that. Did it stem from your religious background or your parents' political backgrounds, or what? Because you said you're from the South. You said different things. Where did you kind of come to these conclusions and convictions about this topic?
Absolutely. Like I said, I grew up in a family that was always very pro-life. That's what I was always told, at least, was that our family was pro-life. And with being from a Christian family, that's kind of the stance that everyone in my family had at the time. So I didn't think a lot about it. I didn't know much about abortion. I just knew, in theory, abortion bad, pro-life good, and that's kind of all I knew. When I went to college, I went to a Christian college. I went to Liberty University, and my freshman year, they go over biblical worldview. You have 2 semesters of that, and in the second semester, they go through all of the abortion procedures. They go in a lot of detail on the percentages of what's happening with abortion in our country, and I had never heard that before. I didn't know I didn't know how violent abortion was. I didn't know how harmful it was to women, to families, to the preborn child. Like, I didn't know any of these things until then, and that really opened my mind to it. And since we're on this subject of kind of being more personal about it, when I was in college, I myself, when I was 18, had an unplanned pregnancy, and my pregnancy actually ended in a natural miscarriage. And through that whole process, it just showed me firsthand the dignity of these little people in the womb, and it showed me how just deceived so many people are on the subject of abortion. And I kind of just, the trajectory of my life changed, and I got really, really focused on this subject from there.
So you would say that through that miscarriage, it kind of opened your eyes and made you understand more about abortion
Yeah.
instead of like me at 18, you would kind of think you might want to get an abortion, but that made you go more to discover the ins and outs of abortion.
Yeah, I think going through that was the most difficult thing I've ever been through in my life. And that was the most terrifying situation I've ever been in. I mean, I was obviously not planning to be pregnant at 18 and unmarried, and that wasn't what I thought my life was going to be. And when that happened, I understood for the first time where people are when they're going through this thought process of, it's just terrifying. You don't, I mean, your brain goes straight to the worst case scenario of, oh my gosh, I'm going to be poor and homeless and my parents are going to kick me out of the house and I'm going to have no support and all my friends are going to leave me and I'm going to live in shame. And it felt like the end of the world. And it dawned on me that, oh, this is why people consider abortion, because it seems like a solution at the time when you're going through all these difficult emotions and crisis that you're just trying to get out of as fast as you can. And then going through the miscarriage, it's what I experienced with my miscarriage was very similar in certain ways, not entirely, but in certain ways it was similar to what some women experience with a chemical abortion. And that just knowing what women are going through on their own by themselves at home through that. And I was able to see my child even at only 8 weeks. It was already like you could see the form of the human being at that point, and it just showed me that this was an issue that really needed to be addressed more.
Wow, at 8 weeks.
Yeah, around 8 weeks.
Wow, that's pretty early.
Yeah, at 8 weeks, most babies already have a heartbeat. They have fingers, they have toes. You can already see. I mean, obviously, I believe that life is, dignified from the moment of fertilization. Scientifically, that's kind of proven. But there's something really solidifying about seeing those, certain traits, in a child with your own eyes.
So, so we put like a little poll on our story, and we wanted to get people's opinions just to see, do people think it's good? Do people think it's bad? Or is it kind of like in the air, like not sure? It's a hard topic to say. And we had a few people that said it's kind of hard to say whether it's good or bad. And so anybody here that feels that way, feel free to type in the comment and in the comment section, or ask questions, or even request to join the live, and explain why is it a gray area. So like Stacy Love, it's a gray area for you. You said, why is that? You feel like a woman has to do what is best for her. And then for everybody that's just now hopping on, the best way to communicate with us is hopping on the live to have the conversation, because we are not going to always be able to see the comments, and then we'll be on to a whole other topic and you'll still be typing, and you can only type so much, and sometimes it's easy to misunderstand what you say. So Stacy, if you want to hop on and share your 2 cents real quick, feel free. But what are your thoughts of like the idea that people are kind of like you said, where people say, I don't agree with it, but it's kind of a gray area because you can't tell people what to do because you don't know what it would be like to not have support and things like that. How do you address that topic or that train of thought?
Yeah, I think that's a very understandable place to be. I'm a woman. I'm all about women's rights, and I think that people should have the rights over their own body. That's a concept that we generally follow in our society. Like if I have the right to deny medical care over myself, if that's what I choose, right? Like I have rights over my own body. The thing is, when it comes to abortion, what's taking place is you are taking the decision out of another person, right? This preborn person, even from the basic first cell stages, from the moment of fertilization, they are a distinct human being with their own DNA strand. It's never been created before. It'll never be created again. They're living, they're growing, they're developing, they're human. All of these things are irrefutable scientific facts. So where that right to make that decision ends is when it's affecting another person, right? And we don't have the right to make a decision over other people's lives. And when it comes to women that are genuinely in need of support, I agree with this. There are people, pregnancy is difficult anyway, no matter what situation you are in, whether you were planning to be pregnant or not. Pregnancy is difficult, and there's all kinds of situations and circumstances that people can be in that make it even more difficult. And I would never deny that or say that people aren't going through these real situations. But we also have to look at what is the solution that's actually going to help this person, right? If a woman feels that she needs to have an abortion because she doesn't have a support system, well, having an abortion doesn't actually give her a support system at all, right? Or if a woman is thinking she needs to have an abortion because maybe she's living in poverty and she has a really poor financial situation, having an abortion didn't give her a better financial situation. It just piled more trauma and difficulty over what she's already experiencing. So as pro-life people, our answer should always be that we want to give support. We want to give help in whatever area is leading women to the abortion facility. We want to address those things and actually help them.
Okay. So when somebody says, you kind of addressed it, but what do you say, to somebody that says, well, it's still that child is relying on my body, so why should I have to do it? Like, why should I have to let this person rely on my body if I don't want them to?
Right. There's a lot of different arguments that kind of play into this one particular thing, right? This branches into a lot of different areas. I hear this a lot when I'm on campuses, and people will refer to the human fetus, the baby, they'll refer to them as like a parasite almost that's leeching off of the mother and taking the life force and everything. And I understand where people are maybe coming from.
Sorry, I don't mean. I'm gonna have to cut you off on that one. I don't understand where people are coming from on that, because a parasite is a different type of animal. It's a different type. It's like it's a different creature.
Right.
That's like saying an insect or a bird or a fish. It's a person. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it is a person. I think, what I always come back to is that we don't blame people for the environment that they're meant to be in, right? So when there's an astronaut that's in space and they have to wear a spacesuit because they need oxygen, their body isn't designed to be in that environment. When we're looking at the preborn, they are designed at that point in their development to be in that environment inside the mother's womb. We can't get angry at them for being in there. That's just where they're designed to be at that point in time.
Right.
I think that there's something to be said here about, like I said earlier, I do understand that pregnancy is difficult, and I would never claim that it's not on a person. But when I look at the different possibilities that are at play here, when I look at what I know about how women really suffer after going through abortions, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, there's a lot of suffering that can last for the rest of their lives also. So when we're in these difficult situations that are taking place, like an unplanned pregnancy, this is a very difficult thing to go through. There's not going to be ever a solution that makes all of it go away, because even if you're using abortion as what society paints as like a band-aid or a fix-all for the issue, you're still going to have this aftermath of dealing with that situation a lot of times for the rest of their lives. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of different moving pieces to this, but essentially at the end of the day, this is another human being, and removing that human being from the mother does end their life. And also, abortion is not just the removal of the preborn from the womb. I think people just kind of think that way. They try to think very they try to think very positively about it, I guess, because it's too difficult to get into the intricacies of what it is. But abortion itself is extremely violent. Like, it's not just taking a person out of the womb. It's going in and intentionally ending their life through different means that no matter what type of abortion you're talking about, all of them are all extremely, extremely violent.
Awesome. I mean, that's not awesome, but it's awesome that you're explaining it that way.
Yeah,
I'm
and
so,
to
go ahead,
piggyback off
Flo.
what you said, I heard like for people that do get abortions, one of the worst things is actually like moving forward. Like you said, the psychological, emotional trauma from that, just knowing that, this life won't get to see, its first birthday. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I made a decision to pretty much have it killed off. And so I
Yeah.
know that could be hard for people as well. So I thought that was a pretty good point.
Yeah. This is something, through what I do, I've met a lot of women who have had abortions. It happens every day when we're on campus because this is very prevalent. A very high number of people in our society have gone through an abortion experience, and I meet people all the time that are just completely heartbroken over this, and it's been years since they've had their abortion, and they're still just completely heartbroken over, whether they made the decision themselves, whether they were coerced into it. There's very, very high numbers of abortions that take place that women feel forced or coerced into their decision that they didn't want to have. So these are things that affect people all the time. I have met so many people that regret their choice. I have yet to meet somebody that has chosen life, that has chosen to parent their child or place their child with an adoptive family or whatever they chose. I've not met a person yet that has regretted that choice. Every single one of them is glad that they made that decision.
So we have someone who's requesting to hop on real quick.
Okay.
Sometimes my camera's delayed, so they may show up and you guys may see them and I might not. Oh, there we go.
How you doing?
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So I'm in the car. I'm about to go to the gym, but I jumped on the live because I think, well, abortion in general, I feel like it's something that people do every day, and I think there are, like, I know a friend that I went to college with, and I actually went to Liberty too for college.
Oh wow.
Um but I went to school with a girl who was raped and, you know, went back and forth of whether or not she should keep the baby because of their circumstances. But I mean, she was pro life. She kept the baby and raised the baby and, did that. And I feel like there are extreme circumstances where it's not a yes or no answer in situations like that, but at the end of the day it's murder. And I feel like for women who are saying in certain circumstances, I'm not going to have the resources, you probably should have thought about that before you lay down and open your legs, is my thought. Because I feel like a lot of people use that as, oh, okay, well, I can just get rid of it, like it's as easy as you changing your shirt. But my thing is, if you're living a lifestyle where the outcome could potentially you be pregnant and be a mom, then you should think about that before you start making decisions that are going to ultimately lead to you being a mom, knowing your circumstances already of maybe not being in a situation where you're going to have support, or doing something out of pressure. But at the end of the day, it's like you made the decision, so you should reap the consequences of what you did, regardless of whether you agree with the outcome of it. You just have to put your big girl pants on and handle your responsibilities. That's my personal thought, because people just make excuses as to why they do the things that they do. But I'm a Christian and I'm 100% pro-life. And I 100% agree with you that once you know that you're pregnant, like, that's murder, because that's actually like conception. That's a baby. That's a life that you're taking. And I just don't agree with that at all. So
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm big on this idea of sexual responsibility, right? And this, consent to sex is consent to potential pregnancy, even if you are using like a barrier method contraceptive or whatever. They're the only 100% effective birth control, if you will, is abstinence. It's just the
yep.
reality. And if people choose to, engage in sexual intercourse anyway, even if they use contraceptive, there's still an opportunity of pregnancy, and it's just never going to 100% across the board be like safe, right? So I agree with that. I think the big thing when it comes to this is a big topic. This comes up every single time I have probably 98 to 99% of the time when I'm talking to people about abortion. The situation of sexual assault, right? That situation comes up because this happens, right? It is horrible in our society how common it is for people to go, not just women, but for people in general to experience those things. And, the first thing I want to say is that no person ever deserves to go through that violation against their body and that violence against them. Like, that is just the worst. It's just horrible that that's something that ever happens. People that are survivors of this deserve to be given every bit of love and care and support and protection that we can possibly give them. And the criminal that's done that crime deserves to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We need to be making laws better to have harsher punishments on that, because there's not harsh enough punishments on it right now. So I am a big believer in these situations, empowering and supporting people. But going back to something I said earlier, though, abortion is very traumatizing as well. When a woman's gone through this violation against her body, the reality is an abortion is a further violation against her body as well. It gives her, women who have abortion experiences are 80% more likely to have a subsequent mental health concern, the highest numbers being in suicidality and substance abuse. That alone is extremely dark, and most women don't realize that that's a possibility for that type of psychological trauma when they go into abortion. There's also, a much higher risk of future preterm birth and future pregnancies. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all these things that can go wrong. And the reality is, when a woman has an abortion, even in these difficult situations, she leaves that abortion facility and she's not given support. She's not given counseling. She's not given therapy. So she's experiencing all this added trauma on top of what she's already done and not receiving any help. So the answer to this is that we need to give authentic, actual support to people, right? And also, statistically, the majority of women that become pregnant through sexual assault situations, they decide to keep their child and to parent their child. We also have to look at the other side of this, right? We're focusing a lot on the woman, which we're all equally human, we're all equally valuable. We never want to value this preborn person over the woman, because they're both human beings that deserve respect and love and care, right? But we also do have this preborn human being, and we can't value somebody differently based on the circumstances surrounding how they were conceived. That would be wild, right? If I had another 25-year-old woman next to me that was very similar to me in every way, but she was conceived in rape and I was conceived through, a loving two-parent household, that's the ideal situation, that doesn't make me more valuable than her, right? That doesn't make one of us more or less worthy based on what our parents did or did not do. We are all equally valuable because we are all equally human, created in God's image, no matter what.
Yeah, I agree
Wow.
with that. And I mean that's the reality, because I have friends who battle with a lot of that because they, had abortions at a young age because the situation wasn't the right way. And at the end of the day, I think about it like, what would I wanted my parents to do if they were in that situation? Like, if they were to take away my life or decide that, it's not the perfect circumstance, we don't have enough money, and think about me not being here because of a decision that they made, because babies aren't accidents. They didn't decide to, pop up in your womb. Like, they're not the mistake. It may not have been the ideal situation, but we can't make that decision for them and just say, oh, okay, well, I don't want you, so I'm just gonna murder you and act like it's nothing. It's like, it's a serious thing. There's a lot more that comes with the decision that you make, like guilt and all of that, and just still having, like, I know my friend, she still had, like, her body still do the motherly thing, but she's still going through like the motions of feeling like she still had a baby, even though she had an abortion. So it's like, that stuff doesn't go away because you decide to murder the baby, because you're still going to have all of those feelings and all of those things. And every time she sees a baby, she thinks about the guilt of what she did. And I don't know that she feels like she'll never get over it, but it's like, you have to forgive yourself and move on and walk in grace and understand that you made a bad decision. But like make better decisions going forward. And, you know, because you can't control what you did in the past, but you can control what you do going forward. So,
Yeah. And there's also, you know, another thing the pro-life movement as a whole is really big on is support after abortion too, because like I said, there are so many people that have gone through this, and there's so many different supportive resources, because you're right, this is something people deal with for a very, very long time after they go through the situation. And it's important that we get people connected to healing resources. You know, I talk to people all the time. Even I had a conversation just last semester with a girl on a campus, and she had just had an abortion like a few days before I was talking to her, and it was because of a sexual assault situation. It was really, really rough. And I gave her resources, and she was so surprised, and she was like, oh, people aren't going to shame me or make me feel horrible about the decision I made. And I was like, no, they know you're going through something. They just want to help you. And it just blew her mind that there was people that actually cared about her like that. And my only wish was that she had known there was people that cared about her like that before she had decided to make that decision, when the only person people in her life that were speaking into the situation were just telling her that to be successful or to be, you know, an empowered woman, she had to have her own child's life taken.
yeah. Wow. That's awesome. I appreciate you guys for letting me put my 2 cents in.
Yeah,
This is
Yes,
really
thanks
sir.
fun.
for hopping on.
Of course.
So we have another request. I'm going to bring them on in a minute. But it's something you said was very interesting that I never really thought about, which was the idea that one person is more valuable than another depending on how they came into the world. So, for example, you said if someone is, you know, great, we'll say that for the algorithm, and then someone comes through a two-parent household, for those of us that are spiritual, that are believers, you know, if we believe God has a plan for all of us, does he not have a plan for that person that was conceived that way?
Right.
If he does, then what right, regardless of the circumstance, do we have to say, well, it doesn't really fit into my plan, so I get to kill that person? If we believe that God literally creates everybody, now, if there are some people you believe God didn't create, that God's like, oh, I didn't expect that person to show up. What do I do now? If you view it that way, then I can understand how you could say it's okay to kill someone that had no, you know, couldn't control how they came into the world, hasn't done anything yet. But if you truly believe that everybody was created by God with a specific purpose and everything, then there's no way that you can, in before they've even done anything, come in, say, oh, well, I don't like the way that you came into the world. I'm going to kill you. Or you remind me of someone I don't like. I'm going to kill you. You remind me of this bad person. I'm going to kill you. That's not, I don't care if you're a male or female. I don't care. It doesn't matter. That's not okay.
Right.
And to justify that is wrong in so many ways. I'm not saying that I can't understand or sympathize with people, but
Right.
I don't even think it's a gray area.
Right. And that's what's difficult for me, because a lot of what you know, I talk to people all the time that consider themselves to be very pro-life, but they have an exception policy, right? We call it exceptions when it, you know, people put exceptions in different pieces of legislation or just in their own opinion on abortion. They'll have exceptions here where, you know, they're not okay with abortion except for cases of sexual assault, you know, life of the mother situations, things like that. It's like an exception of, okay, in those situations it's okay, but I can't justify it ever being okay in any situation, because regardless of the circumstances surrounding the conception, the science behind it, the spiritual reality of it, all of that remains the same regardless of how that pregnancy came about. Like you said, you know, scripture says that before God formed us in the womb, he knew us, right? It says in Jeremiah 29:11 that he has a plan and a purpose to give us a future and a hope, not to take that future and hope away, but to give us a future and a hope. And that is true of every single human being, no matter how they were conceived or how that pregnancy came about. There's countless examples in scripture all over the place of people that were in very difficult circumstances where things were just not what anyone would paint as the ideal situation, yet God was able to make good through those situations. And the plans and purposes. I work with other pro-life people that are pro-life speakers that do events and things with me. There's one man, an amazing speaker, that was conceived in a rape, sexual assault situation, and just one of the most powerful pro-life voices I've ever heard. And I'm so thankful that he is here and that he does exist and he is a part of our lives. And the other thing about abortion too that I meant to mention is about 1/5 of our generation is actually missing because of abortion. That's a really huge.
You said one fifth of our population is missing?
Of our generation, yeah.
Just our generation.
Just our generation is missing because of how prevalent abortion is. These are people that are supposed to be in class with us, at work with us, that are supposed to be a part of our day-to-day lives that aren't here because of how heavy this issue is. So that we say all the time that this is the greatest human rights injustice of our time. It's taking people's lives by the millions, around 63 million to date in our country since the start.
So 20% of our entire generation over the whole world.
That's a big number.
Or just
I'd
our
have to look
country.
into. I will say there's been a few different studies done. So that was the most recent number that I had seen. There might be some updates on that. It's been a little bit since I've looked into that, but that's kind of it's 1 in 5, 1 in 6, somewhere around that.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is.
And that's really interesting. And I'm about to let this other person come in a minute. But somebody said if they were supposed to be here, God would allow them to be here. And I would argue this. From that same perspective, I would say, what about slaves that were killed by slave masters? If God wanted them to live to be 70 or 80, he would allow them to be that old, right? That doesn't justify the wrong that the person did. So in the same way that justifying ending someone's life based on your convenience is wrong, regardless of if it's a slave master in the 1800s or 1700s, or whether it's somebody in the Jim Crow era telling you, oh, because you are like this, you're not able to do this. You only count as, you're not fully human. You only count as kind of a human, 3/5 of a human. Or whether you're talking about today and you say, well, you're not outside of the womb yet, so you don't really count as a full person. If we believe spiritually that God gave everybody a soul, and even Jesus said life is within the blood. The baby's heart is beating around. You probably know the answer to that, like very early.
Around 6 weeks.
Very early.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That kind of got off topic just a little bit, but we'll go ahead and let our next guest come in. We got 2 people in the waiting room right now.
Hey y'all.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I wanted to first of all congratulate both of these women. They have been speaking the truth. And I like that they're so vigilant about this topic. And I believe that your first number, the 1/5, is probably more accurate because the truth is that abortion is like an unspoken underground thing, right? It's just like it's happening, but nobody's talking about it. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things. You know what I mean? And I just personally know so many women and people that I know of that it's hidden. It's a hidden thing. Probably your parents won't tell you about it. You know, there's so much that you probably won't ever know because there is a stigma attached around it, right? But also there's shame. There's a lot of shame around it as well. And that's what anything that's shamed is going to keep it hidden, right? It's like porn or anything else that people find shame in, right? And with that shame comes a lot more of the probability of it keep happening. You understand? And so the sad part about that is that not only does abortion change your body makeup, it changes, like you said, your ability to have children in the future. And so when people are dating women and having these conversations, they're not going to find that out early on. They're not going to know why they're having difficulties having pregnancies. They're not going to know why. You know what I'm trying to say? Because it truly limits your body's function. Not only that, birth control does the same thing. So I would say more so 1/5, or maybe even a higher numbers, because we're not even talking about what birth control does, right? But this is a trick of the enemy. That's the only reason why I got on, because as soon as I heard this conversation, I heard the download of that was the whole intention. The whole intention behind this is to counteract what God intended for it to be. So if you have a quote unquote option, right, you will not surely die, right? You won't see the death, right? You won't have the responsibility, right? All these things create the contingency. And even with the male species, well, she can take the B pill, you know, the after pill, or, you know, or she can. So it's not. This is the part that really is bothersome to me. And by the way, I finished Liberty for Masters in 2019. So shout out to Liberty.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Great school, and I love that it incorporates.
I promise we didn't plan this. So Liberty University, if you see this, you can make like a commercial with this.
Right. But you got women who know how to communicate well, right? And then we have our spiritual grounding. And that's what I really loved about Liberty University. And so, but the sad part about this is that women are alone. The man is nowhere to be found. You know what I'm trying to say? And that's typically what pushes a woman into that mindset, right? And so, okay. Sorry, we got all good. That's what pushes a woman into the mindset, because if there's not accountability on the side, because it takes two, right? And it pushes that woman into that mindset because there's so much shame associated around pregnancy, the church, you know, unwed mothers. It's mothers. There's not unwed fathers. It's just the conversation is so centered around women, right? And I know that it's because it's a woman's body, and so it's a woman's choice, quote unquote, right? But it's really a choice of to choose life or to choose death, and that's spiritual life or spiritual death, right? And that's the truest choice of them all. And what that I'm sorry, but and what that entails in its fullness. Either you're not stuck, but you're either in a role that maybe you're not prepared for. And somebody wrote in the comments that sex should not be an option unless you're prepared for it. But they're teaching sex ed in 8th grade.
Right.
You know what I'm trying to say? So they're planting these seeds early on. So then these girls and these children are experimenting in early grades. You know what I'm trying to say? And that's the minor of it. Then you have bullying based on male and female relationships. You understand? Then you have sexualization and who I'm going to be. You know what I'm trying to say? Based on male and female relationships. So that's just a minor part. But a lot of that creates the conversations that become the thoughts that lead to those choices, right? And so that's my input in this thing. I think the conversation has to change to take the responsibility off the woman. I think the work that you're doing is essential. And people don't know those things exist until they get into a circumstance, because the only thing they do know exists is an option for abortion, right? If it's not illegalized in some of their states, right? But and that's the thing. As young as 16 or older. Now I do believe that people are so young and they can't take care of themselves. You know, there was that show 16 and Pregnant, right? That was a whole thing to me. I'm like, why is this on TV? Right? It just made no sense to me. I know I'm off.
I got a
about,
question.
but I'm just saying, like, but it created a whole nother issue, right? But it's just like none of it makes sense. That we still need to get back to the Word of God and saying there is sex in a marriage, right? That we got to get back to that. But media and everything is quick to go against it. But that's what the Holy Spirit was just telling me, that like that is the whole goal. That was Satan's whole goal. He comes to steal, kill, and to destroy. But God came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. So
I got a question for you.
I know y'all can I'm probably getting distracted, but I just wanted to put my input into that and say
Wait, before you go, I got a question for you.
Yes.
You said the responsibility needs to shift from the woman. Where does it need to go?
The man. It needs to go
in
to
what way?
both. In the sense that they should stop preying on women. Like think about the tearing that happens in college. Young freshmen, frat fraternities, parties, right? All these things that are gravitated around how many women men can get, right? And even in our music and the things that are being perceived in these fairy tales, that, you know, we're only going for that one thing. I believe that kind of distracts us from the wholeness of who we are supposed to be focused on, which is God, right? In our relationship with Him. But when people are out here just focusing on getting into a male and female relationship, that can lead, if you're not trained in that thing. And let's think about how many people are truly trained in the truth of how we attract, keep, and balance those type of relationships, right? And some of us are grown adults. And some of these grown adults are not balancing on that. But it's sad that these women have to carry these things on themselves. But we need to change how men perceive women and their access to women.
Right.
And the way the
but
world
at the same,
views. Yes.
Yeah.
Right, but at the same time, in that sense, sex is like it's 50-50. If it's not, you know, what's the word we're using?
I agree.
Great. You know what I mean? So it's the woman
agree.
consenting too. So I mean, and then at the end of the day,
I agree, but that's
the woman makes the decision to have the baby or not.
I agree, but when God saw Eve and He saw Adam, who did He speak to first?
Adam.
Exactly. And why was there a punishment given?
Because after Adam ate the fruit,
Adam ate.
You see, and women have been taking on this punishment for so long, because the devil came to attack us because of our weakness and how we perceive things and how we take things. And honestly, we don't want to get to this deeper conversation, but the deeper conversation is rape does not occur at the onset of sexual relation. Rape occurs in the onset when a man deceives a woman to believe that there's more to be had when that is given. And I know people don't want to have this conversation, but I do believe that it's wrong for guys to prey on young women or women in general, you know, and you all are not men like that. You know what I'm trying to say? You all are rare in the sense that y'all don't just see women for sex and then go after it like hunting. It's literally a hunting game. You know what I mean?
We're starting to get more people requesting to come on too. I don't want to prioritize because I appreciate you hopping on.
But thank you, girl. Keep doing your good work, and thank you all as well.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
So that went down the rabbit hole of some topics we've talked about before, but it was good that she came on and shared, because I think it's important to get everybody's opinion, everybody's thought on this.
I agree. We need to have these conversations, man. So if you have a point of view, a different point of view, jump on and discuss.
We got three more people in the request.
Awesome.
So let's go ahead and just keep it moving. Everybody who hops on, we appreciate you for supporting us and hopping on. Liberty University. Let's see if the next person's from Liberty too.
I love all this.
So
they're lying.
The next one in line.
We're everywhere.
Jessica Montgomery.
Oh, okay. There you guys are. Hey.
Hi.
Yeah, I am not from Liberty University, but I did go to a Christian college, HBU. Just like listening.
Where'd you say you're from?
Where are you from?
I'm from Houston, so I went to Houston Baptist.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So what are your thoughts? Yeah. What's your opinion, thoughts, questions, comments about what we're talking about?
So, like listening to everything, like we all have our own different crosses to bear. I was listening to the last lady who was speaking, and honestly, just feel like what she was talking about, wearing the same at least. That's kind of our cross to bear, and guys have their own thing that they have to deal with as well. But in all honesty, we have to realize that we're living in this generation that has itching ears, that they rather hear a lie than the truth. So that's why they change the lingo and they say things like, I don't know, termination, women's rights, pro-choice, all of this other kind of stuff to mask the sin so that they don't have to feel bad, and to make it seem as more of a positive thing, more of a choice thing. But at the end of the day, that's the generation that we're in. They'd rather be like, oh, well, this is my life. It's not really born yet, to try and make excuses for what they believe and how they feel so they can choose to live how they want to live. So that's my little 2 cents. I didn't have to go too long. But that's the world that we live in, and that's what they do with most things to justify themselves. They'll change the lingo, like going to another country and killing a whole bunch of people. Like it's just collateral damage. It's the lingo that we use.
Yeah, language is a huge thing. I think one thing that some people from our team do is we do like a man on the street kind of thing where they'll go out at like a protest or something and they'll start talking to people and just sometimes when I'm having conversations with people too, I'll ask some really basic questions of, okay, what is an abortion? And, then they go into, oh, okay, it's a termination of a pregnancy. What does terminate mean? What is a pregnancy? What is a fetus, right? Like if we really boil it down and get down to the heart of this, the fetus is a human fetus. This is a human person. Terminate means to end, right? It means to take the life of. That's what we're getting down to. So what we're getting down to the heart of what abortion is, it's intentionally taking the life of a preborn human being. But when you paint it as it's just a termination of a pregnancy, it seems so much more palatable for people to receive. Or things like, abortion is healthcare. Okay, well, healthcare is supposed to save people's lives, not end people's lives. So that doesn't actually make any sense. Or, when people all the time, it's just an embryo, it's just a fetus. Okay, it is a human embryo, it is a human fetus, similar to a human infant, human toddler, human teenager. It's a stage of development. So I agree with you. All of these terminologies used that are coined by Planned Parenthood, by the abortion industry, that they take these things and they're like, oh, this sounds really good, and then people put it on signs and then it becomes their life mantra, but they don't actually take the time to think about what it means behind it.
No, that makes a lot of sense, especially with the mantra thing, because a lot of the phrases don't really make sense. Thank you for hopping on and sharing your 2 cents.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. We appreciate the support. Okay, we got even more people in the room waiting. So okay, let's keep it moving. So that's the first one that hasn't been from Liberty University. Before we go to the next caller, there was a question, but I think that question will be brought up. Later. Now, someone did mention how it's different. When I brought the comparison between slavery and what's the word, abortion and or the Holocaust, things like that. The reason why I say it's the same is because the people who justified all those things used the same way to justify it. They said, this person is not as much human as me. This person isn't really a real human. 3/5 of a person is what we're going to consider the Africans who came over here on slave ships. An inferior genetic group of people is what the Nazis are going to call the Jews, right? In the same way, if our argument is purely based on, if this isn't convenient for me, I should be able to end it because it's not really human. I should be able to kill them because they're not really human. That's the same argument that Nazis used, that slave owners used, that Klansmen used, and to try to twist it in a way that sounds, kosher, and use euphemisms like it's really pro-choice and things like that. That's why I say it's the same, because you're using people using the same argument to justify the same thing. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next person. We got Chastity Collins.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so I hopped on because I was hearing what you were saying, about the difference, but what makes it different from murders today? I live in Baton Rouge. Every hour on the hour, I'm getting an alert stating that somebody's been murdered somewhere near me.
Right.
So no, murder is not the way to go. We all know that.
Yep.
However, my opinion on abortion is it is up to that woman, depending on the circumstance. Yes, we may need help as far as before the abortion and even after the abortion. I personally have a friend that went to go get an abortion, but God had a way of telling her to keep the baby. However, I also have family members who's here and their dad is also their grandfather. I'm just saying. So it takes a lot for a woman in the same sentence to go through the process of figuring out if they want to keep something in the midst of a situation. I'm gonna share my personal experience. I had someone that told me he wasn't gonna even be here to see if I was pregnant or not.
What did you say?
So I had someone that told me that he wasn't gonna even be here to see if I was pregnant or not. So at that point, that's when my mind started going. What do you do? Do you take plan B? Do you get on this, that, and the third? So I feel like at the beginning stage, if somebody tell you that, you go kill it right off with plan B, right? So if you feel that you're pro-life, take the plan B off the shelf. I'm not going to necessarily say take birth control off the shelf because birth control can also help with health issues. But if you feel that you're completely pro-life, take everything off the shelf then.
I agree.
Yeah.
But for me, I feel like in certain circumstances, and if it murder, it depends on how you really look at it. Because you got to think about it too. You put in certain situations, not saying that every situation is a rape or a molestation situation.
Great.
Some
Great.
situation is by choice.
Great. Make sure we say it, just say great, because the algorithm, we don't want it to kick us off or something.
True. So, with that situation, I mean, everybody don't go through those, types of situations. But in the same sentence, like you have to look at from a woman's perspective of where is her mindset, because that person can have their baby and still postpartum kill the baby and herself. I've known people to do that.
Yeah, I think there's, like I mentioned earlier, I don't know when you hopped onto the live. I think I've been in a situation as well where I was alone, single, and pregnant, and not planning to be pregnant at all, and it was absolutely terrifying. So I know what you're talking about. This this situation of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, my whole life was in full on crisis mode. So I do know how that feels. I know what you're talking about. And I would never belittle that experience. I would never tell people that that fear is not valid, because that's a terrifying situation to be in. But when we get into talking about things and having this discussion on different circumstances, and okay, in this circumstance it'd be okay, and in this circumstance it would not be okay, we're starting to get to where we're not really qualified as human beings to make these decisions over other people's lives. That's where we've run into a lot of, like he was talking about earlier, some human rights just disasters where people were making decisions over entire groups of people based off of anything other than the fact that they were human. And the fact that, even scientifically, factually, scientifically, we know that human life begins at fertilization, in the sense of, even from the very, very first moment, this is a human being that is living, it's alive, it's already developing billions and billions of cells just right from the very beginning. So, valuing this human being differently based on the circumstances that their parents are in, that's where it gets into some human rights issues for me that I can't really get past. But at the same time, that's why I think, honestly, I can agree that we need to be doing even better than we are when it comes to supporting women, when it comes to supporting families, when it comes to helping people through these difficult situations, because that is absolutely the missing piece that I think we're starting to get. I think as a society, we're starting to finally get this understanding of, oh, if we don't want abortion to be an option, we actually have to help people with this stuff. And we've been moving in that direction for a while now. And it's been, I've been doing a lot of research. We have a new a national website called standingwithyou.org that we've released, where literally it's nationwide, so people can just put in their zip code and get all of the resources near them, not just pregnancy resources and diapers and baby bottles, but also housing support and helping find jobs and childcare and anything anyone could possibly need support wise to be a successful parent, or choose adoption or whatever they want to choose, is there available. And the more that I've been doing all this research on this and seeing what's out there, the more I'm seeing that the resources and actual help for people far outnumber what the abortion industry is able to offer people. Really, they're only able to offer one thing, which is an abortion service, and then that's it. These people are walking around with all this trauma and they don't have any help. Whereas the goal is to help in every single area we possibly can.
Gotcha. So, and I also seen that Chris asked about like condoms and birth control or whatnot. I seen that in the comments earlier. Um, I just feel like condoms and birth control go hand in hand for the most part. But like I said, like birth control, I feel like birth control could still be on the shelf. I take birth control for my health reasons,
Right.
not because of anything else, but my health reasons. Um, but as far as like Plan B and all that, how do you feel about that still being on the shelf, being a pro-life person?
I am against Plan B, and I am also against hormonal birth control. Barrier method birth control like condoms, I don't have any issue with. The reason behind my personal being against Plan B, any type of morning after pill or hormone, well, I would say most hormonal birth control. Obviously, there's so many different kinds out there, but it's because most of them are what we would say are potentially abortifacient. In the sense of, the first line of defense is obviously to prevent the sperm from eating the egg, which, sperm and egg separately are not human beings, right? They're separate entities.
Right.
But there's a backup mechanism in there that prevents implantation. So if the first line of defense fails, there is fertilization that takes place. It then prevents that fertilized egg from implanting. And if we believe that life begins at the moment of fertilization, and that implantation, basically that would cause a spontaneous abortion, and that would, be an aborted embryo at that point. And that's why I am personally against those things, is because of the potential, right? And I know it's like a lot of people come back with, okay, but it's potential. You don't even know if it's happening, because how would you even know that that's happening? But that's my point, is how would you know? If I'm driving down the road at night and it's dark and I can't see very well and there's something across the road and I can't see what it is. It could be a coat that fell out. It could be a branch. It could be a person that's laying there on the road. I don't know what it is, but the point is that I don't keep driving. You stop. You don't just drive over it, because there's a potential of harming another person, and we don't want to harm other people.
Gotcha.
So I think the thing that kind of points out to me from the question that you, or the statement you made earlier about the fact that, like, hey, is it really murder? Is it not? The way that I would kind of answer that question is, it's not the fact of, like, is the situation hard or not? I guess the question that needs to be answered is there a soul in that being or not? Did God put a soul there, or did he not? And if he did, and then that's the question that needs to be answered. It's like, okay, do I have a right to end that person's life versus someone else's life? Like, for example, like she said earlier, I don't know if you were here earlier in the conversation, but she mentioned how, like, imagine there's a child who was conceived via grape.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another one that was conceived in, like, a 2-parent household or something like that, right?
Which one is more valuable?
Yeah,
And
which
I get it.
yeah, which kid is more valuable, And it's kind of like, even at like very early on, like they can do tests to take, like, the blood sample from the fetus to see, okay, what's the blood type, are there going to be any issues? And when they feel that prick, they flinch because they feel pain, because it hurts. And so when we're talking about the actual abortion process, this person is feeling pain while they're being torn apart, like limb by limb. And so, like I said, I 100% agree with you that, like, and I think we all agree that a lot of people are in bad situations, that they should not be in those bad situations. People should be trying to help them. They shouldn't be having to take care of stuff on their own. People should try to come help. And when people try to come help, and even if people, I just don't think we should, kill people. Even the murders you were talking about before, I don't think those are good either. So I'm not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When I was looking around, I was listening to Sirens Den because somebody was shooting somewhere. That's just
You should
everyday
be at
life.
home.
I'm at home.
Oh.
That's the bad part.
I thought you were in your
I'm
car.
just sitting in my car.
Oh,
I am
okay,
in my car, but I'm at home.
Oh, okay, I got you. Well, you stay safe. But
Yeah,
yeah, thanks for hopping on. We appreciate your
it's no problem.
conversation. That was really good. Stay safe too.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one.
You too. Thank you. Okay, we got 3 more people in the chat. Let's see who was next. I'm just gonna go with her. I think I have to wait for her to get off completely before I can bring someone else on. But yeah, I don't know. What do you have any thoughts, T-Love, on this? You've been pretty quiet this whole time.
Man, this is a lot of information for me. The only thing I know, I don't even know anything about babies until they're about 2 years old. where I can play with them and pick them up and, throw the basketball, football around. But before that age, when you have to carry them, I don't mess with babies. But no, I kind of want to know, is there like a percentage or anything like that, or a statistic of, I guess, like the man's influence on women getting an abortion?
That's a good question.
There is. I can't remember the exact number right now, but there was a study done where, of those surveyed in this particular study that I'm talking about, I believe it was 73%. It was somewhere around the 70% of women surveyed said that they did feel some type of pressure or coercion into their abortion decision. So that's a super, super high number. I mean, that's absolutely insane. Of course, I don't know in that study if it was particularly just men that were influencing them. Obviously, a lot of people that go through this are also influenced by family members, by friends. I've just heard a story from from an abortion survivor recently that it was her grandmother that was forcing her mom into going through with an abortion. So, yeah, there's all kinds of different people that play into it. But
what do you do? What do you do when let's just say you're born and you find out grandma was trying to get you to have an abortion the whole time? It was trying to get your mom, like,
almost set grandma up.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the woman I'm speaking about. Her name is Melissa Oden, and she was born alive after an attempted saline abortion, which saline abortions don't really happen anymore because that was before.
Wait. Hold on. So they tried to have an abortion, but she survived and still was born?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, grandma gotta go.
Saline abortions, what they would do at the time for these types of procedures is they would inject a saline solution into the amniotic fluid, and the baby would soak in this for up to 3 days and would be scalded from the outside in. It would kill the baby, and then the mother would go through a labor and delivery and deliver a stillborn child. This particular woman I'm talking about, she soaked in the solution for 5 days, which was way beyond what the typical time frame was, and she was born alive. And that's considered an unsuccessful, a botched abortion is when a baby is actually born living. So she survived that in the room. Apparently, she found out later on that her grandmother in the room instructed the abortionist to not give her medical attention. So she laid just by herself with no one giving her medical care for several minutes until a compassionate nurse took her to the NICU, and she survived and was adopted into a family, and she's still living and speaking in a powerful voice today.
Did she ever find the grandma?
I don't know if she found the grandma. I know she eventually connected with her grandfather before he passed away, and he was a part of their life. I can't remember exactly. I know some of her family members, when she connected with them way later in life, were already passed away. I know her mother, for years, no one told her that that she was born alive. She thought that her child had died in that abortion, and she went like 30, 40 years ish thinking that abortion was successful. Wow. She found out she was alive.
Wow. That we're going to get into this next week. Next week we're going to be talking about more of the political side of it, and some of the political gymnastics people do. But there was a bill, I believe, that was passed in Colorado that one of these states that said it is actually legal now. If a baby does survive an abortion, they can actually finish the job. And we'll save that for next week. But that's just kind of crazy to me. We've got our next guest, Jocelyn, I believe. Jocelyn. She'll correct me when she gets on, I'm sure.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, how you doing? Where are you from?
Sorry. I am actually from Haiti. I do not live in the U.S. Never. I have so many questions. Okay. first question is, at which point do you consider it an abortion? Is it when because we use the word fetus a lot. So is it when the child, well, when the living being becomes a fetus that it's considered abortion, or is it from the spermatozoid, um, you know, um, how do they say that? Is it from then or when it becomes a fetus because it wasn't always a fetus? When is it really considered an abortion?
It is considered an abortion anytime after fertilization. Once sperm has met egg, and this is a what becomes a zygote at that point. From that point forward, it is already the moment that fertilization happens. It's a human being from that point. So whether it's a zygote, an embryo, a fetus, infant, toddler, adolescent, whatever it is, it's considered an abortion at any point from fertilization.
Okay, so if a man, if he wears a condom, it's not an abortion.
No, that wouldn't be considered an abortion.
Okay. Okay, so I think you answered Chris' question. I think he has something like that. I really wanted to know also. And I have another question. I do not live in the US, so I do not know about really, support that they give to women that, wanted an abortion after being raped. But what I know, what I saw is really women getting raped.
Great.
Okay.
Great. If you
And
say great.
great. Women getting raped, not receiving any medical attention, okay, not getting help, because I come from a country where that's how it is. That's why for me, it was normal to allow somebody to have an abortion, because what are you gonna do? I think some things that people do not consider is it's not only by keeping the baby, it's after, because I believe that not everybody should have children. That's my personal opinion. Having children is not for everybody. So when you have that child, okay, you kept it, you've been raped, you kept the baby, and now what comes after? You have a child, and where I come from, you cannot really give that baby in adoption. So you're stuck with a child that you cannot take care of. You have no support whatsoever. Okay, no support system, nothing, no money, no job, nothing. I'm not talking in general, but for some people, that's the reality. Let's say after the earthquake back in 2010, yes, a lot of young ladies got pregnant. So how am I gonna tell that little girl, that 14-year-old little girl that has no money, no house, no food, no medical attention, there's no hospital, nothing. How am I going to tell that child to keep a child? You know?
Yeah.
Some,
Yeah. So
yeah, go ahead.
I will say I'll be honest, right up front. What I know a lot about is abortion in the United States. I'm not super well versed on the ins and outs of, different government systems in different countries and things. I don't want to claim to be an expert globally on all of it because I'm not. But I will say I think what it comes down to a lot of times is a lot of times what we're doing when we're having this discussion is we're talking about where we're going to put our time and our efforts and our resources, right? So, when we talk about government funding of different things, it's this question of should government or, private donors or whatever, should they be funding abortion to make life better for people, or should they actually be putting time and effort and resources into actual helpful options for people? And it seems pretty obvious to me that if we're talking about how are we going to make people's lives better, the only anything that it does when you're putting all these time and effort and resources into making abortion more accessible for people is you're, like I mentioned way earlier on in the live, you're placing more trauma on people instead of actually giving them helpful resources. And it seems to me that it would be a lot better time spent focusing on getting actual help to address those things that you mentioned, to address those things of people that need food, that need shelter, that need, you know, basic human necessity things. I would much rather spend my time focused on getting those things to people that need them rather than, you know, giving a woman abortion as an option and saying, okay, if your child is killed, then somehow these other situations you're in will get better, because it's just not reality. Those situations that she's in, she's still going to need all of those resources that we discussed.
I got you. I had another question. I don't remember, but something I don't know. I still cannot wrap my head around that. You know, not telling somebody that they cannot have an abortion, because I believe, not even in the case in the example that I took because it was extreme, but let's say even if I have all the resources, everything around me, but I know stories about how people get really, you know, I think somebody else already said that. Wouldn't it be better not to have the child at all instead of putting a child, a baby, in some situations, in some positions?
Right. Yeah.
Like when I think of it from, you know, realistically, I ask myself that
Can I
question.
ask you a question?
Like, wouldn't it be better at some
Can I
point?
ask you a question?
Yes.
So you're basing that off standard of life, right?
Sorry?
Like standard of living, like they wouldn't have a good life.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So you live in Haiti, right?
No, I live in the Dominican Republic.
Oh, Dominican Republic.
But I'm Asian.
Okay, but you're Haitian.
Yes.
Okay. So what if people in the United States said, you know what, all the children that are living in Haiti, they're going to have a terrible life. We should just end their life now. Would that be a good way for them to look at it? Just because we think, oh, well, we don't think that's a good life. We think that we wouldn't like that life. You know what I'm saying? Would that be, that would be
Yeah.
kind of it would
Extreme.
almost be like playing God.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, from a Christian point of view, because I'm Christian, I get it. You know, I get it. But when I'm looking at the reality, I ask myself questions. And earlier you asked, when you are somebody like that lady, that the grandmother wanted dead, wanted the mom to have an abortion. That's my personal story. One of my parents wanted, let's say my dad wanted my mom to get an abortion. Okay, so you don't trust the person really. You ask like how that person felt. You know, you do not really trust the person that wanted you. You know, that wanted your mom to get an abortion. So you love the person, you want to trust the person, but like if you didn't want me then, do you want me now? Now I'm more of a big responsibility. You know, you have school, you have food, you know. I just wanted to let you know
how do you feel about that? Because that's a unique situation. I haven't met someone like that. Like, how do you feel about that?
Well, God rest his soul, he's dead. So I think I finally let it go, you know, because you have to forgive. But in reality, it's not really something you ever get comfortable with. Knowing that the person that's supposed to love you, and that's what I was saying, you know, not everybody should be a parent, or some people just cannot take it to have a child or anything. So it's better somehow, you think, I think maybe that's where I got that mindset from. Sometimes it's better to just, end it there. Okay, not, you're done with the bother, but it's not really something you ever get comfortable with. It's something you can just avoid thinking of, and just forgive and move on.
Mm.
And you're here because God wanted you here. So there's nothing that person can do about it now. All grown and everything. So
Wow.
That's for sure.
you just live with
That's
it.
for sure. If you survive an abortion, like, God had you
Yeah,
here. Like, me
I
tragedy
know.
originally
I
to
was
kill you,
meant to be here.
that's a God thing.
Yeah.
Like, you
But
gotta.
I understand. I wanted just more argument, because sometimes when I talk about that, because as a Christian, that's the only thing I wasn't really comfortable with. Not having an abortion, not agreeing to people having an abortion, seeing it the way God sees it. But when people try to explain that to you, they explain it from a place of making you feel guilty for it.
Mm.
Making you feel emotional, making you feel guilty. How can you be Christian and think like this? Shame and everything. So I wanted more argument, more scientific, more answers. Because you can say yes, I agree with it, just because, you are bothering me, you're annoying me with it, so I agree with you. Okay, let's not kill the baby. But as a, change of conviction, that's what I was looking for, and I got it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for hopping on. We
Thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you
And
for sharing.
A pleasure.
yeah,
Bye,
thank you
guys.
for
Yeah,
sharing that. That's awesome.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
No, I do not know how to live.
I got you. There we go.
All you see is.
You see the finger come up and then come up. Okay,
Man.
we have two more guests waiting, but I would like you to kind of speak on what she said. I mean, that was kind of like the effects of someone who kind of survived it, I guess. Like maybe her mom didn't go through with it, but her dad wanted her to. Like what are your thoughts on the whole idea of, like, sometimes it's better to not even, for those people not to even exist than to. Have you heard that argument before? Like, oh well, they'll grow up poor, so
Suffer.
it's better if they just be dead.
Yeah, I hear this all the time, very, very often, of, we don't want people to suffer. So, if we cut that off early on, then they don't have to suffer. And, it's based in an idea that I can kind of understand, because it's coming from not wanting people to suffer. And I agree. I also don't want people to suffer. Obviously, I'm not a horrible person. But at the same time, I hate to keep reiterating the same point, but what are we putting our time and energy into? Are we putting our time and energy into ending people's lives before they start, when we could be putting that time and energy and money and resources into making life better for those who could potentially suffer? And the other side of it, this is kind of, it doesn't sound great, but it's just the reality, is everyone suffers. Like, everyone has difficult situations in their lives that were not good things to happen to them. Everyone has things that they didn't plan on that are out of our control, that no one has complete control over every single aspect of their lives. There's tons of things that have happened in my life that I had zero control over, that I had to figure out a way to move forward. I had to figure out a way to get through that period of my life. And what I'm not saying is people have to suck it up and just get over it. I'm not saying that at all. I have compassion. I think that there's a lot of areas that we can help this, but also this idea that if people suffer, then they just shouldn't exist. Well, in that case, then none of us should exist at that point, because all of us have these things in our lives that are extremely difficult. But what we should be doing is focusing on making life better for people that could suffer.
So essentially what you're saying is, instead of putting all the money and the resources into funding these clinics that will, like, destroy these babies so that they don't suffer, why not take all that money and create facilities to where they will be able to thrive and things like that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely.
And I think the suffering argument too is kind of crazy, because when you look at how abortions are done, the baby can feel pain. That's like me saying, I don't want you to suffer anymore, so I'm going to take you, put you on a table, and take a chainsaw and then saw you up into pieces and then let you kind of die. How is that me not wanting you to suffer? And
Right.
the other interesting thing too is this: you saying it's very arrogant to say, oh, well, this person's going to have a terrible life. That's like, if Elon Musk looks at my house, he may be like, man, your life sucks. You'd probably be better off dead. You know, if Bill Gates looked at my house, they'd probably be like, well, you don't have an elevator in your house? Your life must be terrible. No, I wouldn't want to live like that. We need to kill you. I'm like, whoa, no, I'm fine. And the interesting thing is about this, and we'll probably talk about it next week, but when you look at suicide statistics and people that say, oh, I'd rather not be here, I'd rather be dead, those people are actually usually upper class. It's actually first world problems. That action, I don't want to get banned or whatever, but that action is actually not something that happens in more low-income places, but actually in more high-income places. And so maybe we need to reevaluate our idea of suffering and joy, happiness and contentment, because at the end of the day, there's people in third world countries that are way more happy than people in America who have it all.
Yeah.
And so that's just something that I thought we'd talk about. Okay, we got two more people. Let's go ahead and bring them on real quick.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, I'm Evelyn from LA.
Hi.
I think you guys moved on from the when I requested from that topic, but I'll mention it again. So I just wanted to mention again, I think society is doing a really good job at advertising and normalizing abortion, right? Like the language they use compared to the language is being used at church is completely different. And I think that's why they're having a different effect. So like they're using campaigns, they're investing like millions of money, they advertise it as a healthcare need, but they never mention the side effects of abortion, like the short-term and long-term effects. Like Hannah mentioned earlier, uterine damage, hemorrhage, death, and the trauma that follows with that too. But as a church, like I think Jocelyn mentioned that too, and Hannah too. I grew up going to church. I was born in a Christian household, but no one had that conversation with me. Someone told me it's a sin, but no one explained to me why it was a sin. So I have a question for you guys. Like, what do you guys think we can do as a church to educate our people or our younger generation that are growing up with this new concept that abortion is?
So this is something that we've been entering into the conversation recently in the past year or so, I'd say. Like I mentioned earlier, I work for Students for Life of America, so we've been introducing this conversation of the church's response to some of these issues, because I wish I had the exact numbers with me, but there was some polling done of women in churches and women that have had abortion experiences, and what we're seeing is more than 40% of women that were in this survey said that they were in a church service around the time of their abortion. So these are people that are in our congregations with us all the time, right? And an extremely high number of them also said that they did not feel that church was a safe or comfortable place to discuss their pregnancy options. That's a big problem, right? I mean, what I'm not saying when I'm coming, because I'm big on supporting women and supporting single mothers and things like this. I'm not saying that I want, the 16-year-old girl in the youth group to get pregnant. Obviously, that's not what I want. That's not the best thing. I'm not saying that that's like the best way to handle it. But What I am saying is we need to have better responses and being a safe and open place. I want to see more churches be environments where a single unwed mother could come to church pregnant and not feel shame, that she would immediately have people surrounding her and supporting her. And I think that's kind of where a lot of this has to start, because when people don't feel comfortable talking about their pregnancy options at church, the only place that they comes to their head that's safe to talk about pregnancy options is Planned Parenthood, right? They're like, okay, I'm going to go to Planned Parenthood because they're going to help me through this. We need to have an open conversation with people that, hey, it's okay to be pregnant here. We're not going to shame you. We're not going to, we'll help you. I would never tell someone that every decision they make is perfect, because that's not what Jesus did either. But I want to come alongside people and say, no matter what circumstances brought you to this place, I'm here with you now, and you can be safe. You can be loved and supported here.
I do have a question for you guys. I think you answered that question better than I could have answered it. What about you, C Love? Do you have anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, I think she pretty much hit it on the head.
I do have a question, because I have a lot of people are mentioning. What kind of dog is that?
It's a German Shepherd.
Oh, really?
6 weeks, so he wants to come in, but he won't let me say anything.
So the question I have is, like, I've noticed that a lot of people keep talking about, like, oh, well, I'll feel shame if I do this, or someone felt shame when they committed an abortion or whatever. And I empathize, or I sympathize with that. I can't really empathize with it because I don't know what it's like. But I will say, I do think we need to draw a distinction between conviction and shame. Because there are some things you should be like, that was wrong. And the Holy Spirit will convict you and say, that was wrong. You shouldn't have done that. Whether it's like our last couple of lives, watching corn with the pea, whether it's doing some of these other things, you should feel conviction. There should be a feeling of, I don't feel right. And that's good. That means that the Holy Spirit is with you. Now, if you feel, hey, you did wrong and you're never going to be forgiven and stuff like that, that's different. That's shame.
Right.
But I think some people sometimes are trying to avoid the conviction feeling, and there's no way around avoiding that if we're going to get to a good place.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, I think there's a reality of when I'm not saying it's going to feel good, because conviction is a painful thing to go through in and of itself. And that's, this realization of, I have hurt the heart of God kind of thing. That's not a good feeling. But at the same time, when the Holy Spirit convicts, because I agree, I think that's a really important piece of this. But when the Holy Spirit convicts us, it always is leading us closer to Him and closer into hope and into truth. Whereas when there's shame present, that comes from Satan, and it's leading us into destruction and leading us into self-soothing patterns that are destructive and a loss of hope. At the end of the day, it all comes back down to hope. So I agree with you. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, as long as it is Holy Spirit conviction that is leading further into the heart of God, rather than shame that wants to isolate us and draw us away from it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. But that's another question. How do you explain conviction to a new Christian, or someone who's just visiting the church?
Say that one more time.
Sorry, how would you explain conviction to someone who's a new Christian? Like, for us, we grew up in the church, which means, but for someone maybe who's just visiting the church, how would you tell them you have to be convicted about this topic?
I think Zach's about to look it up.
Go ahead. You guys go ahead. You guys go ahead first.
I feel like I'm talking a lot. I'm going to let you take this one.
Go ahead, C-Love. No, you're the guest. You're supposed to talk the most. There's a reason we brought you on.
I don't want to overtake the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I've actually never been posed that question before. I'm big on just example driven kind of things. I know that when like I said earlier, you know, conviction should always be leading you further into hope with Christ. And I think, you know, my opinion on it, people can disagree if they want to, but I believe that the job of the Holy Spirit is to convict and not for us to kind of conjure up this feeling of conviction, I guess. And so we have to trust that the Holy Spirit is the one that's going to do that and move in that person. And I think the Holy Spirit's also very personal with each of us in what he knows we need from him, and because he's a good father and he wants to give us what we know we'll receive. So some people receive things a little bit differently, and there's not a cut and dry, this is how it should be, this is what you're supposed to feel or experience or whatever it is, because it's different for every single person. But I think that's where it comes back down to helping people understand a relationship with God and what it means to have that close connection with him, because out of that close connection with him is where those things kind of naturally take place, in my mind at least.
So I'll go ahead and read this really quick. It's from Romans 12, Romans 2, 12 through like 15 or 16. And this is the verse that kind of popped up in my head. All who sin apart from the law will also perish apart from the law. All who sin under the law will be judged by the law. For it is not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but it is those who obey the law who will be declared righteous. Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what is required by the law, for they are a law in themselves, even though they do not have the law, since they show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bear witness, and their thoughts now accusing them, now even defending them. This will take place on the day when God will judge man's secrets through Jesus Christ, as my gospel declares. And so that part about like the conscience written in their heart, even the Gentiles who didn't even know the law of God still knew God's universal law of like, okay, there's this tugging feeling because I'm made in his image, right? I know there's something not right about this. Even atheists know there's something not right about the world, right? They know there's something's just wrong. Something's messed up. And that's the reason why I would say when you explain conviction to somebody, that's what it is. And the other day I kind of had this, what would you call like a revelation, I guess you could say, when it comes to sin and not being on the side of like, well, you're okay. There's no sin is involved, and like you're good. Like God doesn't care. He doesn't care that you had an abortion. Whatever, just have fun. He doesn't care that you watched Corn last night and did this. He doesn't care. Just do your thing. He loves you. He brushed it under the rug. He doesn't care. But also not being on the like fire and brimstone, like you're in trouble now. You're never gonna be good enough. And I don't want to say, I don't know if it was God, but I just felt this thought came to my mind of when you need to tell other people about their sin, because God does tell us to do that, right? To hold each other accountable. When you need to tell other people about their sin, talk to them in the way that you talk to yourself when you mess up. You know, where you're like, oh, well, you know, there's grace and all these. We actually made a video about this. It's in our reels. If you check it out, we do like funny videos and stuff. And then the other way, when you mess up, hold yourself to the standard that you generally want to hold the other people to. Because Jesus says, by the same standard that you judge others, you will also be judged. And so it's kind of like reverse what you naturally would want to do. Naturally, when we're not in the situation, we want to say, hey, you messed up. Why did you mess up? That's not right. You should know better. But when it's us, we kind of want someone to come and say, man, give it, you know, God, you know, Jesus died on the cross for our sins. You can't forget that. Right. That's how you want to be with them. And then for yourself, hold yourself to the convictions of what you would want to tell other people naturally. That's kind of a rule I've tried to apply myself. Just my opinion, not
Good.
gospel or anything. But what do you think, C Love?
As far as conviction goes,
Mm-hmm.
just I mean, it's just that feeling of knowing that, like you said, there's something wrong, and that I should be doing something better or different, right? Like, for the example, like you said about the corn thing, like I know I shouldn't be watching that, right? So if I do watch it, I feel some sort of conviction from watching it because I know the standards that God has for me, right? So it's just that feeling of just I guess feeling kind of guilty in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because maybe we can all agree that we can be more proactive at educating people and providing these resources. I'm actually a healthcare worker. So in a hospital, when my patient needs something, I usually know what resources to provide to them. But when something like this comes up, as a Christian, sometimes I feel stuck. Like, what kind of resources can I offer from a Christian perspective? So I'm very thankful that you guys are doing this, are opening up a conversation like this, because we don't really have them. So it's great.
Wow. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for hopping on, and thank you for your support. I think that's a good question that I hadn't thought of. Is like, people that are actually in these situations, what advice can you give as a Christian? And so I'm glad that there are people on the ground in these environments that have these convictions like you do. So really good job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
All right, we got one more. In perfect timing, and then we'll hop off. We usually go for 2 hours. So, are you good? Are you still? You tired? Sleepy?
I'm good. I've got my giant cup of water. We're good.
Okay, awesome. Okay, last one. Hey,
Christina.
Hey. Hi,
Christina,
guys.
how's it going?
What's going on?
Good. Okay. So before I talk about what I wanted to talk about, I actually want to touch on the conviction thing, because this is something that I struggled with for a long time. So I spent a lot of time praying about it. So, as concise as possible, conviction, you know, is different than condemnation in that when you are condemned, you are one with your sin, right? Like, it's all you can do, you're helpless from it. But conviction comes from a place of, I am not my sin, I'm a child of God, and sin is something that can be cleansed from you. So when you're condemned, you feel hopeless, you feel despair, because, Jesus didn't come to condemn the world's already condemned, right? So people who don't have Jesus are like, well, I can't get rid of all this sin. Like, this is just, it's who I am. I was born this way. And yes, you were. We were all born in sin. And so when you're condemned, you're one with your sin. But when you're convicted and you're in Christ, you're one with Christ and you have his righteousness. And so when you sin, you're like, oh, this is not who I am. This is ugly. Like, God, clean this. I'm sorry. Right. And so there's a differentiation there. One leaves you humbled and hopeful. The other one leaves you defeated. Right. So, for what it's worth. But that is not why I wanted to come on, but I was like, perfect timing. So the conversation you guys were just having is a perfect segue, because 9 years ago, right after I gave my life to Jesus, I literally got baptized on August 31st and found out I was pregnant on September 15th. And I was like, oh no one is going to take me serious in my walk with Christ. I was like, now here I am. And one of the things I was praying for was help to be abstinent, right? To not be doing that anymore. And then I ended up pregnant. And so I immediately was like, no one is going to take me serious in my walk. Like, this is so shameful. No one's going to accept me. Like, I was just baptized. Like, what am I supposed to do? And so I literally started praying and asking God, like, how he saw abortion, because I thought that was my only option. And I was like, I don't know. I prayed about it for like a week. And then I had this dream. and in the dream, there was this line of people lined up with their kids of like all these different ages. And I was like screaming at them, like, what are you doing? Because they were lining them up to have their limbs tied and pulled apart. And it wasn't like gory in my dream. It like looked like stuffing and chicken breasts when it came apart. But like, that's how I was like, I know this is God, because God wouldn't give me some like gruesome dream. But like they were all different ages. And when I woke up, it was just clear as day. It doesn't matter if you're 10 weeks pregnant or they're 10 years old, it's the same thing. And so then immediately, complete transparency for you all, I started to ask God to take my baby, because I still thought my only option was, and I was already a single mom, okay? Like I had a son, but I was like, I'm gonna do things right now, right? Like that's what I wanted. And I asked God to take my baby. And then on December 3rd, 6:15 a.m., I woke up and I passed like this huge blood clot, and I thought that I lost my child. And immediately I just broke down and I started begging God, like, please, right? And I just remember getting to the hospital and I'm just praying. I'm like, please let there be a heartbeat. And they were like, there's a heartbeat and there's a 50% chance that you're going to lose this child. And I was 14 weeks along and I continued to bleed. And every time I bled, it was like, there's more and more a chance of losing your child. It got to the point where at 20 weeks, like I was losing a lot of blood, and they were going to hospitalize me for my own safety at that point. And I remember having this doctor come in the room, and my son was 5 at the time. And this doctor described how he was going to remove my baby from me piece by piece to save my life. And I was like, no, like, you're not. And I had like this whole NICU team came in and they were like, well, how far do you want us to go to try and like save this baby? I'm like, everything that, like, what do you mean? Like, what I didn't really recognize how endangered my life was, right? And there's so many times people say, well, it's healthcare and like for medical reasons, you know, realistically, it's only like 2% of the time that abortions are non-essential, or that are only 2% are considered like essential. I mean, non-elective. And this would have been a non-elective abortion. But God weeded that out of me. Like I laid in this hospital bed for an entire month, bleeding and hemorrhaging and having them stop my labor multiple times. And then almost dying, and my baby being born 1 pound, 15 ounces with a hole in her heart and bleeding on her brain and all of these things. And it was a huge struggle, right? 87 days in the NICU and all of that. But that little girl, like, I can't imagine my life without her. And I'm still a single mom, and now I'm waiting for marriage, right? Like, God weeded a lot out of me. But she is the most incredible little girl I have ever met. And she has completely transformed my life. And when I think about, like, here's the thing. I didn't feel like I could go to church and say, hey, you guys, I'm pregnant. Like, no one even knew I was pregnant until, like, 2 weeks before I had her. Like, I hid it. And I was in the hospital alone, bleeding, not sure if I was going to live or die, because I felt like the church was not going to accept me because they weren't going to take me serious in my walk. And I think that is a huge issue with why women in the church are having abortions, because they think that it's easier to just do that and move on with their lives. And I can say that because I was there. I thought that was the best option, but like that dream, I couldn't shake it. Like there's no way I could shake it. And I thank God every day that he changed my heart on that, you know? Like he took me, like I was asking him to take my daughter, and he got me into a position where I was willing to lay my entire life down for her instead. And I don't know, I guess I just want to encourage anybody who's had an abortion or been in that place to know, like, it's not over. God's not done. You know, he can transform anything, whether you went through with an abortion or not, whether you're a single mom or not, right? Like, I'm officially like a college graduate. I still have more time to go, but like things have changed. Like, I mean, my life was crap. Like my life, I was in foster care. My mom just today, like I found out, like she's going to serve jail time for her addiction and theft and stuff like that. Like that's still my reality. But I have such a strong relationship with God and with my children, right? That like I don't know where I would be without them. I don't know where I'd be without that little girl, you know. And thank you for what you're doing. These conversations have to happen, and there needs to be more hope, and there needs to be open communication in the church, and there needs to be options, right? I didn't have support, but God made it happen, you know, and He can. And so I just wanted to share some of my story because I can relate across the board, you know. Yeah, that's all.
That is
Wow.
powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys, when I say this little girl, like her name is Faith, and
Her name is what?
rightfully so, Faith.
Oh, I thought you said Faith.
Faith. No.
Oh,
Doesn't have
okay.
a fake
Faith.
name. No,
Oh, okay.
it's Faith.
Okay.
And I literally have gone to her parent-teacher conferences where her teachers are like tearing up, talking about how compassionate she is and how she's like she's the girl in the class that comes alongside those kids with the special needs and helps them and like befriends these children that are severely autistic, and like that's just who she is, you know. Like what would this world be without her, right? Like, and how many of these babies like does God have a plan for, you know?
Right.
I'm not saying that to shame anyone, just like that's the reality of it. These are children. 10 weeks, 10 years, doesn't matter, and they are children that will grow into adults and that have a purpose and a place in this world. We can sit here all day long and try and decide what we think their life would be if they were born, and it's unfair. We can't do that. We have no way of knowing, and it's better to live and suffer and struggle and overcome than it is to not live at all.
Right.
So
yeah, and I think your story is just like the ultimate testament of like God just taking care of you and your children, right?
yeah.
Because in the end, yeah, it's your child, but it really belongs to God, right?
Right.
And so if it's being conceived, it's going to be born, God's going to take care of it in the end, right?
Yeah.
So I think that your story is just like a great testament to that.
That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I was trying to hold back my tears the whole time because I just wanted to cry because I respect so much you being willing to share that so publicly because I know that's hard. And I just think it's incredible how much faith God has so obviously built in you through that experience and being able to use that experience to speak to other people, right? That's like, you know, I don't know if you were on the beginning of the live, I was sharing my story about my unplanned pregnancy when I was a worship major at college. So like,
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I had unplanned pregnancy at 18 when I was studying worship music at a Christian university. So I get it. I get where you're coming
But we're
from.
here.
But what I can't speak to, what I haven't experienced, is the medical diagnosis, because that's a really big piece. I hear that a lot, and I have answers, to people when they bring up these situations. But you have been placed in such a unique spot to have personal experience to say, hey, I was actually given a diagnosis where I was told I should have an abortion, and here I am. And I think that's so powerful. So thank you for sharing that with us. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad to share. When I saw the topic today, I was like, okay, you guys, I'm gonna stick this one out and come jump on before I go to bed. But
we appreciate you for sharing that, because that was an amazing testimony and an amazing story. And I think that there are some things that kind of have been echoed from other people as well. Other people that spoke not from their personal experience, from what they've said, like I feel like in the church they would not be accepted, or they would feel this, or they would feel that. Obviously, as a church, we should try to be as open and, you know, loving as possible, right? But even if I don't want people to think that if that feeling is there, it's because the church isn't accepting, because we all have that inclination to be that way. In Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve ate the fruit and they heard God coming into the garden, what did they do? They hid. And God never gave them a reason to hide. And so we naturally are inclined to want to do that. And then once we do that, we listen to the enemy telling us these things and all these other kinds of things. So even when we were kids, even if we knew we were sick, we didn't want to, or I didn't want to go to the doctor. I don't know about you guys, but I never wanted to go to the doctor, even if I knew it would make me better, because I felt like, what if something happens, like they give me a shot? I don't want a shot. I'll just deal with the sickness, even though it may like kill me or something. And so, but anyway, all that to say, I'm glad that you God still reached you even when you didn't go back in the church and have the community. He still reached down and spoke to you on his own. So that's really great.
Absolutely. And I understand exactly what you're saying. And there is a big part of that is that shame and the enemy lying to us. I was already convicted about premarital sex before I got pregnant, right? Like before I knew I was pregnant. Can you guys hear me? It's very echoey for me.
Okay. I'm just muting my mic when you guys are talking so that it won't echo. If you guys want to do that.
Oh, okay. So I already had that conviction. But it's different when people can see it, right? Like if you're pregnant, they can see that. Like, oh, she, you know. But I will say that church can be so geared towards the two-parent, picture perfect, never gone through a single thing in your life, grew up in church type family, that in and of itself can make someone who's been through something, regardless of whether they're a single parent or not, it can make you feel like, oh, this isn't really a place for me. Like, I know God loves me, I have my relationship with him, but at this church, you know, I don't feel seen or heard, because the sermon is always like talking about the husband, how he needs to be to the wife, or how the wife is to be to the husband, or talking about like just in these two-parent dynamics. They don't necessarily, and this is not all churches by any means, but they don't really go into, you know, those who were addicted to drugs, those who, you know, were in foster care, or like myself, like I'm a survivor of human trafficking. Like, I've been through a lot of things. And so I think with me and a lot of people who have a testimony, right, that, and we all have testimonies, so don't take that wrong, but that it can feel very much like our experiences or mistakes aren't really accepted at church, because, you know, the feeling sometimes is that everyone has it together at church. And I'm blessed and fortunate enough to be going to a church where people are real and authentic and they talk about hard topics. And I just want like every church to be like that, because that's what the body of Christ is supposed to look like. But also the church I go to, they literally have 3 slots for single mother parking. So like they very much are like, hey, we see you and you're welcome here. I look forward to there being more of that, you know.
I think over communication from churches is such a big thing, because the other side of the coin too is that the reality is there's not very many churches that I know where people would walk in as a single pregnant woman or as a single unwed mother and walk into a church and have people pull her to the side and be like, you can't be here. Like, churches don't do that. Like, that's not a thing. But right. I think more this conversation is kind of surrounding how much is it talked about and how much are we making it clear to people, because when women are in these situations where they are in crisis mode, even if they're in a very supportive church, if the church isn't very outspoken about being supportive of people in the different situations they're in, it can be really easy to go to worst case scenario. Like when I was pregnant in college, my brain went to, I'm getting kicked out of the house. I'm getting kicked out of school. I'm going to be a school dropout. I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to have nothing. I'm going to get strung out on drugs. Like none of that was probably reality, but because I was in this crisis situation, my brain went to a worst case scenario and treated it like it was reality. So when, as a church, we have these open conversations ahead of time, like before people get in these situations of, hey, no matter what happens, we're here for you. And even if this thing takes place and, you know, we don't want you to get into the situation, but even if you do, we're still going to be here for you, making that clear across the board helps people when they are in that crisis situation to think, okay, I know it feels like it's the end of the world, but I remember they told me that I could go to them, so I know I can go to them.
Right.
And it kind of helps alleviate a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, that's about the 2-hour mark right there.
Perfect.
I think it went by really fast. Everybody that hopped on, thank you for hopping on. We want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to just share your social media, what you do, one more time for people that don't know who you are, Hannah.
Yeah, so my name is Hannah Wolfe. My social media, my Instagram handle is Hannah Wolfe with an E at the end. Hannah Wolfe _SFLA stands for Students for Life of America. So I work full-time in the pro-life movement, working with campus groups in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. I'm working with pro-life students, the pro-life generation. I think people get it very confused. People think that it's only like old white men that are pro-life. It's not true. We're fighting that narrative. So, and if anybody had any questions that you didn't get to ask or anything like that, or that's more private that you wanted to ask, my DMs are open anytime. So feel free to reach out.
And for anybody that that is just now following us, we share all these lives on YouTube. So we'll be uploading a couple from last week this weekend onto our YouTube channel, and we're going to go ahead and start going live on YouTube this summer. So if you want to enjoy these conversations, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you like funny skits and stuff like that, follow our page. We do all that. C-Love, you got anything you want to add?
Huh?
You got anything you want
to add? Yeah, just like Zach said, follow the YouTube page, follow Kaz TV, follow Hannah, follow Christina for her amazing testimony, and follow me. I am C-Love, Zach, Hannah, Christina at the bottom. This is Kaz TV. We're out.